Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this remote small business expo. I'm James Harris, Assistant Commissioner of the Small Business Advocacy Division with the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, also known as BACP. I will be moderating this panel discussion, but before we begin the discussion, I want to mention that this webinar does offer closed captioning. To enable closed captioning, please click on the live transcription button at the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred method. We encourage you all to ask questions during the discussion by using the chat box. A Q&A session will follow this discussion. And now please welcome our panelists for today's session, Show Me the Money, Funds at the Local Level. Today, we're joined by Michael Nash from Allies for Community Business, Jim Jeffy from SCORE, and Emma Westfall from the Women Business Development Center. Each of these panelists is a capital specialist in the city's Neighborhood Business Development Program, which offers free advisory services to help small businesses based in Chicago grow, sustain, and thrive. Before we begin, I would like to offer each of the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and share a brief word about the organization. Jim, would you like to start?
Okay, Jim. I'm Jim Jaffe. I have a long background in managing large public and private companies throughout the world for many years. I've also operated as an independent consultant, particularly working with equity and funds and hedge funds who invest mostly in impact investing, which is the kind of investing that's involved with trying to do good and at the same time make money. I've lived all over the world, Eastern Europe, Macedonia, Croatia, and so on for many years, worked in Asia for many years. And today, I still have some small business stuff, but I do a lot of volunteer work for SCORE, all involved with helping small businesses. So I'm happy to be here and see what I can add to the process.
Thank you. I will pass it to Emma.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you today. My name is Emma Westfall. I'm Associate Director of Access to Capital at Women's Business Development Center. We are a nonprofit that's been around for about 40 years. My background, originally I was in corporate retail, both retail as well as wholesale and inventory as well as merchandising, and made the pivot to nonprofit work through kind of my contacts with WBDC in supplier diversity. So a lot of procurement background and really the business finance aspect of things from a large corporation perspective. Now what I do is I work with small business owners, all small business owners, not just women, but on their business finances. Really excited to be with you today. I've already heard a little bit from my colleagues previously. So just excited to be with you today.
And then finally, Michael, if you would like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the organization.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Michael Nash. I'm with Allies for Community Business. I've been in this position for a little over 2 years as a community lender. Allies is a non-for-profit based on the west side of Chicago that does small business lending, coaching, and connections for business owners located in Illinois and Indiana. My role is primarily on the capital side. So I'm here to try and help small businesses get the funding that they need to grow and expand their businesses. And my background is primarily in finance for a long time, real estate sales and leasing, some background also in credit coaching and investing and things like, capital protection. So I try to give a lot of folks that aren't ready to qualify at that time some paths to funding. So we kind of look to build a relationship and everything. And I'm excited to be here and hoping that I can eventually help some folks at this event.
Thank you. So we'll get into the questions. So the first question is, can you provide an overview of your capital access program and how your organization supports small businesses through the MEDC program? And I will open it up. Anyone want to kick this off?
I'm fine with going first.
Go ahead.
So Allies has a couple of pretty simple capital access programs. We have a term loan that runs between $500 to $100,000. So we're certified as a micro lender and a CDFI, so Community Development Financial Institution. Our term loan is 3 years, currently at 9% interest. We also have a line of credit that kind of functions as an extension of a term loan, so 1 year interest only, and then interest only based on whatever you're using at the end of that 1 year. Then whatever you've used then gets converted to a 3-year term loan. I'd also like to mention that we do fund startup businesses all the way down to 0 days in business. So the startup funding is a little bit more limited, with a maximum of $12,500, and that we also do not have a credit score requirement as part of our base funding. So I can go deeper as the conference goes on, but that's some of the base of our funding programs.
Thank you. Emma or Jeff, you want to go
Yeah,
next?
I'll jump in. So with WBDC, I kind of describe us as advisors first and lenders second. That's just kind of my own tagline that I've developed to make people just understand kind of where our priorities are. But we do offer one-on-one business advising that's confidential. I think from a access to capital perspective, that's usually a really great forum to discuss, your specific situation, considering, your financial situation. It takes a while to peel back those layers to understand the situation. And also, obviously, there's a lot of private information and sensitive information in there. So one-on-one business advising, I would say, is kind of our bread and butter. We also do webinars, regularly scheduled webinars that discuss our 2 lending products. I also do a quarterly capital readiness webinar, which I kind of call my greatest hits of capital readiness. So what does it take to get yourself and your business in a place to actually be able to capture that capital? And then we'll do special topics, depending upon the time of the year, what's going on. We also do cohort. Our Access to Capital team does a data to revenue cohort. So for folks who really want to get, that hands-on learning as well as build that peer social capital, that's a great option as well. And then we do have 2 in-house lending products. One is Kiva, which is our 0% interest crowdfunded microloan, which my colleague Dania Beal is a capital access manager for. That's a great option. It is definitely for new businesses. There's no time and business requirement. You don't have to have any sort of collateral, so no assets that you need to pledge. There's no credit score minimum, and it is a crowdfunded loan. So it's 0%, but I kind of say that you got to put a little bit of sweat equity into it. But it is a great marketing tool, kind of simultaneously attain the capital you need while also spreading word about your business. So you create a profile, and your fundraising platform goes live, and anyone around the world can actually lend to your campaign. Once you do successfully complete that campaign, then you get the capital and you repay that just like you would kind of a typical term loan. And then we have our direct lending program, which I would say is kind of the next step up in the capital ladder, which is up to $50,000, 50, for businesses that are 12 months and older. This one's a little bit more typical just in terms of process, similar to a traditional bank loan, but it really has this kind of white glove service where we recognize that a lot of folks who get this loan have never had traditional financing before, and there is that learning curve. So it's very hands-on, but it doesn't have a credit score minimum either. Again, a lower time and business requirement. So those are 2 of our products, and I'm excited to share a little bit more about those later.
The way SCORE operates has many similarities to what Emma is talking about. We essentially do one-on-one counseling. In the Chicago area, I believe there's something like 70 people like me who volunteer to work with small businesses. And the thing is, however, we don't have money. Well, what we do is point people in the right direction. So I have, for example, quite a few clients who come in right into SCORE, say, I'm starting a business. What do I do? Or they'll say, hey, I need money. But the challenge always is they may not really have a good understanding on what they're looking for and how it works. And so the goal that we have may be very similar to the way Emma works with her clients, is to say, okay, let's start from the basics. What do you need? Why do you think you need it? Why are you in this business? Have you done the research? Are you aware of what the market is, et cetera, et cetera? So it's not just the money, which ultimately everybody needs, but rather trying to help them get an understanding of what's going to be required to be in business. And as I said, we don't provide money, but we do provide information. And for example, if I'm working with a client, one of the big things that the client needs to understand is, what are the sources of money? They all think, not all of them, but many of them think, oh, I've heard about angel investors. I'll just go get some money. And I say, well, wait a minute. It doesn't quite work like that. The money is not sitting there waiting for you. You have to go after it, and you have to have a compelling reason that you're going to lend you the money. And again, as an example, they think, well, I can get a bank loan. And I said, well, do you understand how bank loans work? And they say, well, not really. I would say, well, the big challenge with bank loans is, hello, they need to be sure they can get paid back. It's all wonderful to think that you can get your money, but it doesn't, again, work like that. They need to have a very detailed plan. You have to pay back principal and interest. Your operating income has to cover it, and so on. So that's the kind of thing that we try to do, is to get people pointed in the right direction. What kind of money might they need? But far more relevant, I think, is the issue surrounding, what do they have to do to have a successful business?
Thank you. I think this is such an excellent overview of the sort of capital access programming that is offered through the Neighborhood Business Development Center program for free to small businesses. I do also want to highlight that in addition to these three amazing organizations, we do also have a capital specialist organization called Chicago Sunshine Enterprises, which was not able to be represented on this panel today. So I just wanted to highlight that before we move on to our next question. So the next question is, what are some common mistakes businesses make and key obstacles they face when trying to secure capital?
Well, I'll jump in on that one. The single biggest mistake I find is a misunderstanding of what is involved in getting money. Everybody seems to think, you read about these enormous funds that are out there, multi-billion dollars, and somehow they translate in somebody's head to the nail salon that they want to open up on the South Side. They think, oh, well, there's money and everything. But most people, or I shouldn't say many people, have not understood what is going to be required to get them there. And it goes back to the comment I made a couple of minutes ago, which is, hey, you've got to have a plan, and you've got to be able to convince people that this is a good idea. It's one thing if you're borrowing from your brother-in-law who loves you and doesn't care about getting paid back, but almost everybody else wants to be sure that it's going to work. And I think the other mistake, there are three sources of money to oversimplify it: grants, loans, and equity capital. People think, oh, well, I can just write in and get a grant. Well, but again, what is misunderstood about that is you've got to set yourself up in a way so you must understand what's the mission statement of the granting organization, because unless you make your pitch to what they need, you're not going to get the money. So lots of misunderstandings surrounding how simple it must be because of all the press that's out there on this.
Yeah, I'll jump in if you don't mind. Jim, definitely, I was like, yes, I have heard all those things before. So I've kind of put mine into three buckets, if you will. And I think Jim was speaking to kind of the assumptions, right, that everybody makes based on their own life experiences, based on their education background, whether you've had a business before or you've not had a business before. I mean, we all come into business with very different ideas of how things work. And so I think those assumptions about how soon you can get money, where that money can come from, what amount, what it's going to be used for. There are so many requirements and kind of pieces of that puzzle that a lot of folks, I think generally lack that information. And, you know, no shots at Loyola, but I got through an MBA and I still, when I started advising small business owners, I learned so much about the process and about those barriers that you just don't know about. Even being in the corporate world, even being in a graduate program, there's still so much learning that happens. So I'd say assumptions is kind of one thing. I'd say capital readiness in general, and that's a big umbrella. That goes back to the business plan, which yes, you do need to be able to have a business plan that you share with people. Projections, not just your revenue projections, but also your expense projections. And critically, how are you going to have the capital in place to achieve that revenue, right? I can't make $4 million selling coffee if I only have $100,000 to buy the beans, right? Like that's just not gonna translate. So that's super important. Having your financial statements put together, and then on the personal side, having your kind of personal house in order. That is super, super important as well. It's kind of like building a business on, kind of to use the biblical reference, sand, versus rock. Is if your personal situation is in a tenuous place, that is going to be kind of like building your business on sand. And then lastly, I would say, financial relationships and just understanding the capital landscape in general. Business lending is not the same thing as personal lending. And again, you really only learn about that by leveraging the resources in the ecosystem and by, trial and error, talking to different lenders and looking at different products. So those are kind of the three buckets, I think, I would say.
A lot of everything was covered, but I'd like to give just some really simple advice to people on the call. It's easiest to get money when you look like you don't need it. When your financial house is not in order and you look like you're desperate for money, it's usually very difficult to get. So just simple things like understanding that the days of EIN only lending is kind of, for the most part, flown away, and that you do need to have your personal credit situation in order and to not commingle funds, just really to look like you can do just fine by not getting that loan. It's usually a lot easier. Also, building relationships and doing what I call having your own personal portfolio of lenders. That's by doing business with more than one financial institution. I still run across a lot of entrepreneurs that do personal business banking, savings account, everything with one bank, as opposed to, I recommend at least two banks and one credit union that you should have your relationship with. So you're getting those data points. And those are just simple things that really anybody can do to kind of give themselves a leg up. Also, always be researching, always be looking for that information. Typically, you get the information that you seek. So always be looking for that information that's going to help you put forward whatever it is that your mission is with your business. So those are just a couple things I'd like to add, but everything else pretty much said by Jim and Emma.
Thank you. And I really like what Emma said. We get formal educations in these institutions, but there is nothing that beats practical knowledge and actually working with small businesses. And I think that that's one of the benefits of utilizing the MBDC program, that these folks are engaged in the community and are working with small businesses on a daily basis, so they understand these nuances better than most. So definitely connect with them if you're looking to access capital. So with that, I'll move on to our next question, which is, minority and women-owned businesses often encounter these challenges more severely. What are strategies that can help close the gap? And maybe Emily, you want to kind of kick us off on this one?
Yeah. So I would say, even just from my personal experience of being a woman in business, sometimes there's internalized struggles with feeling like, do I do I deserve access to these spaces? And the answer is yes. And a lot of what I do is actually just affirm the fact that, you know, anybody can have an idea. Anybody can have a business, right? We all deserve and we all bring, right? That's kind of one of the great things about business is you identify a need. You have every right and ability to make that business happen, right? So I just like to, number one, affirm everybody on here is like entrepreneurs come in every, you know, every type of form, background, education level, socioeconomic level, race, gender, everything. So number one, just know that. Number two, ask for help. I think, you know, we don't know what we don't know, and there are so many of these common pitfalls that if you just ask, you know, anybody in this ecosystem, other business owners, you can help avoid some of those common pitfalls that other women or minority business owners might have made, or other business owners in general might have made, so that you can, you know, build your business, you know, more sustainably and maybe avoid some of those bumps in the road. So I just say, number one, know you deserve to be here and ask for the help that you need. Use your resources and continue to engage. You know, we're not just here for the startup phase, but we're really here and able to assist folks, whether you're new in your business, you want to take the next level and you're really interested in growing your business, perhaps to a physical location or more than one physical location, or you're trying to get into government contracting. Whatever that phase is that you're in, there are resources available to help you achieve those goals. And, you know, there's people here who want to see you succeed.
Mike?
The biggest thing that I would add is one of the things that you actually mentioned, Emma, and that's that resources are here now. So one of the ways that we're closing the gap, not just our organization, but plenty of other organizations out here, is that resources are out here for underserved demographics, underserved communities, where you can make these leaps ahead. Just understand it will take time. Be patient. So come into it with a mindset of ready to absorb information, but then to go apply it. So the biggest thing I would really throw out there is that resources are aplenty now, more than they've ever been, especially in states like Illinois that take a little bit more progressive route to providing resources to budding entrepreneurs to kind of want to see them succeed, be able to create jobs in their community and create wealth moving forward to generations going behind them. So I would just say be patient, seek out these resources, but then go apply that information and have a plan and stick with it.
The thing I'd like to add, James, is that we have a list that SCORE has of, I think it's 65 sources of grants, loans, and everything else, websites, et cetera, in Illinois and Chicago. I'll send that to you, and that might be of interest to some of the folks that are listening in, as in, where is the money?
Thank you. So the next question, and I think this next question is really important, especially given everything that's going on in the federal government. So the question is, how has the funding landscape changed in recent years, and what are some of the important trends small businesses should keep in mind?
I mean, I can go. I love to nerd out on this topic. So get ready, everybody. I really love talking about macroeconomics. Because it's a kind of going back to one of the first things I was saying is assumptions that business owners come into. You know, business lending and operating a business does not happen in a vacuum. And so I encourage people, one random tip I give people is, you know, on your browser, make a couple different options like your home screen. I have like Bloomberg, New York Times. You know, if you want to have a couple different financial like websites on your browser, literally just so I might not even scroll it. but at least I know what's going on in the market that day, or what are some trends that are happening. So I think just number one, understanding that it's really important. And it's not just important for today, but it's important for, right, what business decisions are you going to make in the future? And how do you need to, like, what pieces of the macro environment do you need to understand to make the best decision possible? A few things I'm definitely keeping an eye on. One that's definitely not new to anybody is inflation. So we had been, in a very inflationary period. And so a lot of people obviously were feeling the impacts of that. Back when I was in corporate, we had 80,000 SKUs, and we pushed through during COVID, because I was in hardware industry, home improvement industry. We pushed through 3 different price changes on basically every single one of those 80,000 SKUs in 12 months. So there was just a ton of volatility. So number one, we need to be aware of that. And that has impacted the fact that the Fed has increased the prime interest rate. And so it's just more expensive to borrow money, right? And so that's just the impact of inflation. Number one, you have to keep an eye on what pricing you have, because your pricing should not be, static. We don't want to set it and forget it for 10 years. And then secondly, we have to understand that, the conventional rates for business lending are higher right now, just period. Secondly, I would say, kind of going back to building your house on sand versus a rock. Since COVID, the personal debt to income ratio, so basically how much debt you have versus what your income is, has steadily been increasing. And so one thing I see in one-on-one advising sessions with lots of folks is that people have, in general, credit card debt, a car note, maybe a mortgage, maybe some student loans. It's very common to have quite a few different types of personal debt. It's important to keep in mind what that looks like for you when you're thinking about getting into more debt, right? Potentially for a business. So just understanding that in general, number one, it's quite normal. So don't feel ashamed of the debt you have, but just know that we are kind of heading into a higher personal debt situation. And so I'm just kind of keeping an eye on that.
Any final words on this? I know we want to leave about 15 minutes at the end of the panel for questions, but just want to, Michael, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, just want to add real quickly that what's changed is that the belt is tightened. The belt is tightened. It's become a little bit more difficult to get money. It's become a little bit more expensive, and the qualifications have ramped up a bit. So what I think, like if I was just telling somebody, like in a nutshell, what do you want to keep your eye on? Keep your eye on news that makes money move. And the news that makes money move comes in various forms, whether we're talking about tariffs, inflation, the cost of various products, things like automobiles being the cost of those going up because of the cost of the material needed to make them. And just have a conversation with yourself. How is this going to affect my business? How is this going to affect the customer base that I'm seeking to attract to come and do business with me? So just kind of keeping your eyes open and always keeping your financial house in order, so you don't have to get ready for an opportunity that comes to you. You're already ready.
Thank you. So the final question before we get into the Q&A session, given so much uncertainty that just kind of outline some of the areas where businesses are facing this uncertainty, if you could share one essential piece of advice about accessing capital, what would that be? Jim, you want to kick this one off?
I want to share one thing that I find almost never happens, which I think is critical, and that is the need for an advisory board. What I find is that many people who are starting businesses, men or women, small or large businesses, sort of do it on their own, or maybe they've talked to one person, or maybe they've talked to a banker. I find that if you are able to get a group of people who are interested in you, they don't even have to be business people, but to have a group that you can bounce ideas off, because folks like me have lots of advice for people and will help them, but we're not the be all and end all of this. So I think that if you can have what I would call an informal board of directors, even as you're starting this process up, where questions come up, you can run it by them. What do you think? I find that is enormously helpful in getting a focus on the direction to go.
If I was given one piece of advice, I'd just say, go get it when you're ready to go get it. Don't wait. Uh, in regards to accessing capital, it's the biggest barrier for a lot of business owners of making that next step forward. And typically, I think it's because they didn't go get it when the opportunity was there. And now that they're ready for it, now they're running around looking for money and they look like they need money, as opposed to looking for money when you look like you don't need money. So again, the stronger that you are in your personal, sometimes that transpires to the business. And then it's things like an advisory board. I couldn't really give a lot of advice on that. I know Jim has a lot of experience beyond what I have in that role. But what I see with a lot of my clients is they just wait until the opportunity has arisen and then they go looking for money, but they're not prepared to go get money. So seek out a path and then get on that path, get the money as soon as you can, and then execute your plan.
Yeah. Oh, my one last nugget. I would say we talked a lot about a little bit about business plan, and I know the previous session some folks were talking about the importance of a business plan. One thing I think is really important that I coach folks on is actually having what we call your cash flow projection. So again, projecting out your revenue as well as your expenses. Ideally for at least a calendar year. That should talk to your business plan. So if I'm looking at, right, if I'm your advisor and we meet up and you have your cash flow projection, so the numbers, the revenue and expense projection, and then you have your business plan that talks about what it is you do, how you do it, where you do it, who your customer is, what your strategic growth plan is, yada, yada. Like those two things need to make sense together, right? Because when I'm a lender, and I'm putting on my financial hat, I can read a cash flow or read a projection and be like, wow, they're making a lot of really interesting assumptions here. I wonder what information they have to back that up. And then I'll go to the business plan, or I'll go to the business plan and be like, wow, that looks really interesting. And then I'll go to the cash flow. So I want those two things to make sense together, because you will be, submitting kind of a total story to someone for capital. And I think that that's really important to make sure there's a cohesive story that you're presenting.
Thank you. So we have a number of questions in the Q&A box, so I will select some questions. I will let any of our panelists answer. But actually, the first one is for Emma. The question is, what is the rate of interest for the second option loan that you mentioned?
Yeah, it's between 7 and 9%. So our loan is a private loan. Our interest rate is not impacted by any sort of current rate right now. So whether, the prime interest rate of the Federal Reserve goes up or down, we're still in that 7 to 9% range.
Thank you. So the next question, and this could anyone can jump in and answer. Is there or are there any specific grants or funding programs supporting small businesses moving to clean energy?
You may find them on the list that I'm going to send you. What I advise my clients to do is take a list and go down the thing, look up every single website. Each one will give you enough detail about what's available. But I want to reemphasize, particularly if you're looking for grants, you've got to meet the needs of the granting organization. You have to be able to show them how what you're going to be doing benefits their mission statement, not yours.
I
Thank you.
have
Um,
two.
go
I'll
ahead.
just plug two specific examples. One, the deadline is coming up very quickly. It's April 7th. And this is through the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, IDCEO. Number one, just keep an eye on IDCEO. They have grants throughout the year. But this one is a small business capital and infrastructure grant program. Number one, just make sure you take a look that you're eligible before you actually go and apply for anything. Otherwise, it's just a big waste of time. Secondly, I know there's a Cook County creative placemaking grant that's kind of small business owners can collaborate with local government or local nonprofits. So if you're doing anything in kind of the arts arena, that one is a great one to check out as well.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question is from someone who is looking to start a business. So I'm going to ask the question in a different way. If you all could just talk, and this is for each of you all, if you can talk a little bit about how you all are supporting startups and with the programs that you have within your organizations. And anyone can pick us off there.
Well, what we do at SCORE is we have essentially a twofold approach. One is the money end, which is going back to what Emma was just saying. We need to help them figure out a big, complicated cash flow issue, regardless of the size of the business. And that includes, where's the money coming from, how much is going out, their expenses, their revenues, their projections. And related to this is, where do they want to be in a few years and what do they want to do? I mean, do they want to sell this or get equity in or something like that? So detailed financial information is critical. But the other part of this is what I call the branding marketing side. And that relates to the idea that many people have not really thought about their product. I want to open up a nail salon. Well, okay, that's fine. But what are the benefits of your nail salon to the neighborhood in which you want to open it? And so one of the big things that we emphasize is benefits, 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 and always point out the difference between features and benefits. A feature is, for example, an iPhone that has 2 gigabytes of storage. A benefit is it has 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's the message that people need to think through when they are doing their branding and their marketing. How is it going to be of benefit to the people who want to buy their products?
Yeah, I'll just add, I have conversations with people, going back to the need, right? We kind of talk about the 3 pillars of the business, which is the customer, the problem, and the solution. And of the 3, the problem is the biggest focus. Otherwise, you don't have a business, you have an expensive hobby, right?
Very good.
Lenders don't want to lend to expensive hobbies. Lenders want to lend to businesses that are going to be profitable at some point. So starting off with our, we have emerging business advisors who specifically work on, creating your business model canvas, making sure that you've really flushed out what the problem is that you're solving, who specifically you're solving it for, not all Chicagoans, right? But let's say women between the ages of 30 and 55 in Roseland with whatever education background and whatever household income with 1 to 5 kids. Like, we want to get that specific, right? Otherwise, we're kind of doing the expensive hobby and not really the business side of things.
Michael, did you have anything to add here, or?
Yeah, just from my role as a lender. So for startups, again, we do fund startup businesses that have not had 1 day in business yet. The funding is limited. It's only up to $12,500, but I realize it's extremely difficult for a startup business to get funding really anywhere. And I usually recommend that they take advantage of the business coaching and also refer them to organizations like WBDC, get assistance with things like minority business and women's business certifications, so more doors can open up for them.
Thank you. So we have another question related to business coaching, actually, and there was a mention, I think, Emma, you mentioned, folks need to get their financial house in order. And so this question is, does business coaching include personal financing? Or to ask it another way, if it doesn't, what advice would you give folks to improve their personal finances?
Yeah, I'll jump in, and my lamp is freaking out. But so I don't do advice on personal financials, but I do have, because again, so many of us in this network deal with the whole person and the complexity of the situation. So I do have a lot of resources to refer you to should you have a specific need. So some folks might be having some employment challenges and they want to get into a better place so that they can have a personal income to, again, take care of their personal house, keep their personal affairs in order. So maybe it's about connecting them with job skills training or workforce development to just help them attain some sort of employment. Or perhaps they really need help with existing collections that they have or late payments that they have. We have referrals for that. Perhaps they have addressed those things, but now they really need to just start rebuilding their credit. There's resources for that as well. I definitely recommend, my number one thing I would say here to people is if anybody promises you to improve your credit by 100 points overnight for $5,000, do not do it. I can say that actually categorically. There's not many things I can say categorically, but categorically avoid, right? Cousin Frankie, and I literally have had a client who had a cousin Frankie just absolutely tank their credit, right? And just, there's no recourse really. So make sure you're using the nonprofit resources that do exist to help you get into a good place. And then again, we can kind of revisit the business financial situation down the road.
Anyone else want to jump in on this?
Yeah, for our organization, so with the business coaching, it's at varied levels and it's a lot of different components that are offered. Now, as far as financial coaching, I couldn't say that they're giving you total financial coaching. What I try to do, or what I do in my role as a lender, because I've been bankrupt. The recession beat the crap out of me, and I went totally bankrupt in 2011. And when I came out of bankruptcy, I figured out that I needed to really step my financial literacy game up. So I kind of documented everything I did in rebuilding my finances. And when I'm with a client, I go over their credit report line by line, and I point out things that I see that they may be doing to hurt themselves that they may not even be aware of, like being an authorized user on an account with a low limit but high usage and late payments. I mean, they think they're helping themselves, but in a lot of cases they aren't. So that's one of the resources that I try to provide, just to give people some insight on the power of things like freezing your bureaus if you're not looking for money, how to properly dispute while freezing the sub bureaus, aka the data collection agencies, is also part of this. And these are, just nuggets that I try to share, because I think if you are not born into money, if you don't have a lot of money, one of the quickest ways to be able to get your hands on some money is to get your credit together and get people to actually loan you money based on the fact that you are a low risk of being able to get that money repaid. So that's just something that I try to add. It's not one of the duties of the job. I just think that it helps people. So I try to share that financial knowledge with them.
Thank you. So I have a question here. It's not necessarily related to capital, but I know you all also assist with this. The question is, if I need help with my business plan, can any of you all help me? So if you all just want to talk a little bit about how you help businesses with this sort of planning.
We will certainly help. Frequently, what we find, however, is that people have a business plan that they've paid somebody money to help them with, and it doesn't really work. So we'll help them if they've got a bad one, or help to improve one, or give them the guidelines to prepare a business plan. I mean, it's pretty straightforward what has to be in it. The big thing is that it's got to be compelling, and it's got to contain numbers, and has to show all the things we've been talking about, the cash flow and the growth of the business and all these kinds of things. So, but the money part is only one element, and maybe even in some ways the smallest part of doing this process.
Yeah, I'll add that one thing I think is really important is to have, multiple perspectives on that business plan. So somebody who looks at it, like Jim might look at a business plan and have a different perspective than me looking at a business plan, just because I have a different background, right? And so not any one advisor is going to have, there's no perfect business plan, right? Business plans are meant to be a living document and they evolve. So there's elements that a lender is going to care about when they're looking at a business plan, and there might be different elements that a marketer or a content creator or somebody else might care about when they're looking at your business plan. So I think having multiple pieces of input, knowing what maybe their area of expertise is to get some specific feedback from them in their area of expertise, I think is probably, a great way to use the resources efficiently and make, like Jim was saying, a really compelling business plan.
Okay, so just as a time check, I think we have about 9 minutes left, so I'll ask just a couple more questions before we wrap. So the next question is, what funding resources are available to someone interested in acquiring an existing business?
You mean compared to a startup?
Right.
Yeah, they're the same. I mean, doesn't make any difference whether you are, in my experience, whether you're starting up or you're existing. It may be that if you're in existence, your chance, and you have a track record, your chances of getting a bank loan are significantly higher than if you're a startup. But equity capital is available to both, and grants are available to both. It's the lending area, because banks tend not to lend money to organizations if A, they can't get paid back, and worse, you have collateral.
Just to add to that, recently in the last year, Allies has started doing revenue-based financing. So, I mean, we're a micro lender. That's our niche. So $500 to $100,000. But for more established businesses with the revenue-based financing, it starts at 50,000 and currently goes up to 250,000. We're also a partner of Hire 360, which is for minority contractors. And those loans were going up to $100,000. They're now going up to $250,000.
Yeah, and our loans, like I mentioned, Kiva, there is no time in business requirement, but our direct lending program does have 12 months of revenue as a requirement. Kind of what Jim was saying for lending. Your typical traditional lender is probably not going to lend to you until you have 2 to 3 years worth of business revenue, as well as some business tax returns. That's another big thing. That might be a barrier for folks who have been in business, but maybe you haven't been through a tax season yet, so you don't have any of those, financials that have been submitted to the government. Sometimes that's a challenge for folks.
So, Emma, this is a specific question for you for the grant that was referenced with the deadline of April the 7th. Are you able to drop a link to the website in the chat?
Yeah, I did drop the link. I'll have to scroll back. It was the infrastructure grant for short. I don't know if a moderator in the chat can go back to, oh, I found it. Okay, I'll repost it in the chat. There you go.
Thank you. And I think, okay, one more question that just came in. What are the risks of reaching out to angel investors?
The answer is they're not going to talk to you. The part of the problem is people have an assumption that because angel investors make investments, well, it's an easy place to go. They are just as serious about the money issue as anybody else is. And I think it's important that somebody understand the difference between getting equity money and bank money and grant money. The challenge with equity, regardless of whether it's from an angel group or not, is on the one hand, the good news is you don't have to pay them back now. The bad news is today you got to give up a piece of your business, and it's not inconceivable that they're going to require more than 50% of the equity in your company because it's risky. And if they require more than 50% of the equity, guess what? You are at risk of losing your job if it doesn't meet the plan. So it's a big challenge. And what I find is many folks are naive in thinking that it's a wonderful source. Almost none of my clients have angel money. It's either grants or bank loans.
Anyone else, or we can actually, I see a couple more questions in the chat, and I think we have a little bit more time.
No, I agree. I think that there's a big misconception. I kind of almost think it's like more in like the educational aspect. We hear about these big businesses, like the Uber, whether they do well or not, some businesses are, have been really nefarious with their funds that they've gotten from investors. So I think there's kind of like an idea that they are so plentiful, but I think kind of the reason, like if you think of the word angel, right? Is kind of like how many of us have seen an angel with our own eyeballs is probably quite few. And so that really does kind of speak to the scarcity aspect of that. And that's okay. Like you don't need necessarily an angel investor in order to move your business forward.
Thank you. So I see a question here. Please explain commercial funding versus home-based business funding. Is there a difference, or if you all want to discuss if there are any nuances between the two?
We don't do commercial loans, but we fund home-based businesses. It's just treated as any other business with our organization.
Okay, and so this will be our last question. I saw it in the chat. Okay, so this question is from someone who owns an interior design business. And I guess the question is, in terms of business plans, does someone who runs a consulting business, do they need to also have a business plan versus a business that is product-based? If you all want to kind of talk about maybe some of the difference between a business plan for a product-based business versus a consulting business. And we'll end here.
Well,
Emily, you're muted.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. That's an emphatic yes. I have clients in both spheres, and I think that there's a pretty substantial difference. Usually somebody who's selling a widget, right? They're probably, they might be, like I said, having a coffee shop. That's like usually my example is any Joe Schmo can walk in off the street and buy a cup of coffee from you, right? It doesn't take that much for that person to decide to do business with you, right? That's pretty straightforward. And we all conduct such business every single day of our lives. However, somebody who's in a consulting business, a lot of times, or something that's more professional services, that's not how business is done. A Joe Schmo is not necessarily going to walk off the street into your house, stumble into your business, and pay you 15 grand to do something, right? The sales cycle is going to be entirely different. a lot of times for something that's consulting or service-based versus a widget that any Joe Schmo can walk in off the street and get. So it's really important, number one, to I have this problem sometimes with folks who do services is I don't quite understand what it is they're selling. So that's also really important to make sure that you're illustrating what it is. Again, going back to problem, customer, solution, you still need to have that very clear in your consultant business, but also really make sure that you're speaking to the sales cycle. And that means, how long it takes from kind of attracting a client to, doing the work and getting paid.
Anyone else want to jump in here before we wrap up? Okay, if not, I want to thank you all for joining us for the second session of the Chicago Small Business Expo. I definitely want to thank our panelists for sharing this valuable information and knowledge with us this morning. If you are looking to access capital or looking for free business advisory support, please check out our website, chicago.gov/MBDC. We will take a short break, but please stay tuned for our next session, which will begin at 11:25, which will be an inspiring conversation between BACP Commissioner Ivan Capitelli and our keynote speaker, Ms. Brenda Palms, President and CEO of Sweet Beginnings, LLC. As a reminder, the agenda can be viewed anytime by visiting chicago.gov/BizExpo. Thank you all for joining.